Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pod of the Damned. I'm your host, Ian, and if you're watching this on the video, you can already see that this is not our usual lineup. Nico and Candy are not here. Either that, or they've had like some pretty major plastic surgery and have changed quite dramatically. No offense, Newman, but maybe Nico's just shaved his head and he's got that big long ponytail, and I'm very jealous of it. But we have got a very special guest, returning guest. If you've listened to our episodes on Mandy, you will have heard this man's beautiful voice before. It's Jeff Newman from the Movies for Dayz podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm absolutely fantastic, Ian. Thank you so much for having me back. And goodness gracious, I've never done this in a video medium, but oof, I'm gonna have a hard time not checking myself out all damn night. Look how good I look.
I'm usually too busy being blinded by the glare from my own forehead, so it's quite distracting, isn't it? So, but I hope you're very well.
We go to the same wax shop.
Yes. I think I just missed you last time. I think you were going out as I was coming in. But thank you very, very much. I know I was just saying it to you just before we came onto the recording, but thank you very, very much for stepping in this week. For those who maybe don't know, who are listening to this, Nico and Candy have both done themselves some injuries this week. They've both been hurting themselves, so they're taking some time out to just recover from their injuries. Nothing too serious. We wish them both a speedy recovery, and I'm sure they'll be back on the show very, very soon. So Jeff has very, very, very kindly agreed to step into the breach this week, and we've taken it as an opportunity. So for anyone who listens to this show on the regular, or for anyone who used to listen to Candy's old show on the regular, will be very, very familiar about her feelings on our episode topic today. So in today's show, we're talking all about Freddy versus Jason, and it's well known amongst sort of like our small corner of horror podcasting and social media, and our small corner of friends, that it's probably, I think it's officially Candy's least favorite horror movie of all time, and she really fucking hates this film. And I did have an agreement with her that I would never make her do this, so I very much spotted a window of opportunity to allow myself to talk about this film, and obviously me and Jeff are going to be talking about it today. I'm excited to talk about this film because there's so much you can talk about, and there's just, I think every single person I've like spoken to, every single opinion that I've gotten has like a slightly different level of love or hatred for it. It's so all over the place. Like, not like we've both covered very, very polarizing films on both of our shows before, where some people love this film, some people hate this film. We love it when there's films where people are very in the middle. There is literally a person at every sort of stage on the spectrum about this film, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And people need to understand, if they're not familiar, this isn't just Candy's least favorite Freddy movie. It's not just her least favorite horror movie. I think this is her least favorite piece of cinema going back to the 1890s all the way up to today. I mean, I think when people talk about the new Star Wars movies that they don't like and how, oh, George Lucas ruined my childhood. I mean, I don't think I'm putting words in her mouth. I think Candy would agree. Ronnie, you ruined her childhood.
Yes, and no, she absolutely.
And, I'm not gonna get too into detail here, but I do have a ranking of Freddy movies.
Mm-hmm.
This is not at the bottom of my list.
I'm gonna just throw.
I had a lot of. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I'm just going to go out there. It's not at the bottom of my list either, and it's also not at the bottom of my list of Jason films either. So, and that's
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun revisiting this last night, getting ready for our chat today.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. We have absolutely not put words into Candy's mouth. I'm sure she'll thank us for this little intro piece that we're doing on her behalf. She'll especially thank me when I make it the sort of promo cut for the episode that comes out later in the week.
She's not here, but she's here in spirit.
Yes.
Her hate is sort of clouding over us. We are looking up as if Charlie Brown. Yes, we're bald for the occasion. And we're saying to ourselves, good grief. Freddy versus Jason.
There we go. Right, before we get any further into the discussion of this movie, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. If you would like to support this podcast and follow us on our social media platforms, you can do so. We're on Twitter at Damn Podcast. I used to try and say X, but it's still fucking Twitter. So we're on Twitter at Damn Podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com, and you can subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. Jeff, where can people find the Movies for Days podcast? For anyone who's unfamiliar, a little quick overview of the Movies for Days podcast, what you've got coming up, and where you can be found and all that jazz.
Absolutely, thanks. Yeah, Movies 4 Days, your non-pretentious, easy access movie chat podcast. I also do not like calling it anything other than Twitter, and that's where I am most of the time when I'm not on the Slasher app. You can find me at Movies Dayz. Dayz is spelled with a Z. Except on the Slasher app, it's the same thing, but it's Movies 4 Days. The number 4 right in the middle, because I thought that was so gosh darn clever when I came up with this show. We do virtually everything. Every kind of movie, every Friday, a deep dive into a different flick with a different guest. Everything from Shrek to Schindler's List. I love movies. Pretty much every kind of movie. It's all about celebration and exploration at my network. We do lots of spoilers, we do lots of deep dives, and we do lots of sub-series because don't let my caffeinated voice fool you. I smoke a lot of reefer, and I don't like sticking to just one thing. So I've got a classic show where I just do classic movies, and my actual mom is always there with me. Classic Corner with Mom. I've got a Batman series where we do a different Batman movie every time. It's called I Am Batman. I don't need a horror sub-series. I love horror so much, it just shows up all the goddamn time on my network. But you'll also see things like Never-Ending Story, Clueless, Doctor Strangelove. Good movies is good movies, and that's what you get at Movies for Days. Right now, we've got episodes out on The Exorcist 3. Next week, we'll have an episode out on Desperate Measures. And we've also got 2002's Secretary. That fantastic erotic rom-com with Maggie Gyllenhaal and James Spader. You all thought we forgot. No, we did not forget. And you need to remember. So check me out. Not only am I pretty much everywhere podcasts can be heard, you'll also find me and all my other excellent network members at yourunpodcast.com.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely go and check out the Movies for Days podcast, guys. I heard they've got a really, really good guest on an episode about Hatchet. I'd highly recommend going and check out that episode. Shameless bit of self-promotion there, because it's absolutely me that's on that episode. So go check out that episode as well. But yeah, all of those links that Jeff's just said as well, they will all be in the description for this episode as well. You can check them out and go and check it out, because it really is a really great show, and it's a bundle of fun. And yeah, definitely go check out that Hatchet episode. But in the meantime, we are going to talk about our movie today. Let's fire into it. We're going to talk all about Freddy versus Jason. This movie was released in 2003, was directed by Ronnie Yu, and stars Robert Englund, Ken Kersinger, and Monica Keena. The IMDb plot is as follows. Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees return to terrorize the teenagers of Elm Street. Only this time, they're out to get each other too. So Freddy versus Jason, yeah, you've kind of alluded to it at the start there about, having a list of your favorite Freddy movies, and it's something that I think a lot of horror fans have done with the sort of big franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all your giant franchises. A lot of us, we will all have sort of rankings for these by and large for our favorite films. So we're in the sort of pantheon of Freddy movies and with Jason movies. Where does Freddy versus Jason lie for you?
It is near the bottom. I really like Freddy. And so at the very bottom, because it's easier to count it this way, at the very bottom, obviously, we've got 2010, Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, remake, whatever, the Platinum Doom's nightmare that we've all just need to forget. And then next worst for me is Part 4, Dream Master. And I know a lot of people are going to balk at that choice, but I'm sorry, there's a couple of things in that movie that just take me so fucking out and make me go, are you kidding with this choice? Invisible Freddy in the Ninja Dojo? Come the fuck on. That is a movie breaking bit. And then also the truck keeps showing up, like the loop that they're stuck in. They keep starting over and over and over. Yeah, no, this is no. And then so third worst for me is Freddy versus Jason.
Okay. So mine's is also third worst on my Freddy list, and at the bottom for me is also the 2010 just absolute hot steaming turd of that movie is the 2010 remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. I've kind of alluded to this. We haven't covered it on the show, but I have alluded to it over the time. Is that I actually don't think that Jackie Earl Haley himself did a particularly bad job in that film. I actually think that he did a decent job with what he was given. The script's really fucking terrible. You know, the CGI is really fucking terrible. Speaking of bad CGI, we'll get onto that when we're talking about Freddy versus Jason, because it's not much better. Yeah, like I felt bad for him, and that's about it. I think everything else in that film is terrible. Second worst for me is part 5, Dream Child. I think that's maybe a slightly more common choice to be in there down at the bottom. I see generally quite a lot of hatred for that film, and then for me it goes Freddy versus Jason. But this is what I talk, and I talk about this when I talk about Friday the 13th, because it's also I think I've established it relatively well that Friday the 13th is generally not my sort of favorite franchise in the world. I'm not a huge Friday the 13th fan. And I think when you look at those 3 big franchises, everyone knows that I'm a Halloween guy. Halloween's my franchise, right? When you take those 3 franchises, those sort of giant 3, they're the big 3, right? And I think Halloween has the highest high out of the 3. When you take like an original Halloween film and just how much of a classic slasher that is, and how that changed the genre, and you know how huge that is, I think that has the highest high out of all 3. I think out of the 3 of them, Nightmare on Elm Street is the most consistent, and I just think that Friday the 13th movies are of the lowest quality like throughout. I don't think Friday the 13th has a particularly high quality sort of movie in there. Whereas if you could take Elm Street and you can still say, you know, the original's an absolute classic, you can say part 3 is an absolute classic as well, and that has those highs. And then Halloween, obviously, you have the original, you know, polarizing as it is, some people will claim that Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is one of those sort of highs for all sorts of reasons. You know, there's a lot of love out there, you know, though, for the 2018 reboot that they did. Obviously, you know, Kills and Ends maybe has its own issues as well, but you know, there's a lot of love out there for a lot of those movies. And I think Friday the 13th, whilst there's a lot of love out there for their movies, I think that is more of this is sort of schlocky, classic, just kind of low quality but fun sort of movies. So my favorite Jason movie, my favorite Friday movie is Jason X. Would you believe? And it's because
Jason X is fun.
That
Fun and funny.
The movie itself is terrible. If you taking it into just like isolation, if you're analyzing the shit out of that movie, it's a terrible fucking movie. But you're right, it's so much fun and it's such a blast. And that's the sort of level I put Freddy versus Jason at. I kind of like, I don't know whether or not I can class it as so bad it's good. It's kind of like, I think, bordering on that sometimes as well. Like, oh, that sort of, it's really fucking bad, but because it's so bad, becomes so hilarious. You know, I watched this with my partner earlier today. She was watching for the first time. And I think she was pissing herself laughing halfway through it, just at all the various absolutely like batshit crazy, stupid things that were happening. And you know, we're obviously going to get down. We're going to analyze some of this movie, but you know, I think it's just, no matter how bad this film is, I will relatively regularly, I think at least once a year, we'll go back and rewatch this just because it's fun, it's stupid, it's so bad, and you just enjoy yourself watching it. I don't know if that's the same. I'm assuming that's the same for you as well.
It's very similar, and that's the only problem with Candy not being here. This is just going to be you and I stroking this movie off the whole fucking time. Because here's the thing, and it's perfect that you brought this up, because I made a list of likes and don't likes about this movie, right? Mm-hmm. And at the bottom of my list of likes, things that I like, the obnoxious, campy comedy, unreality choices of some of these actors. And at the top of my list of things I don't like, the obnoxious, campy comedy, unreality choices of some of these actors. It's hysterical. It's both one of the best things about the movie and one of the worst things about the movie. And it really just depends. It's a moment by moment situation. I forgive me if I'm putting the cart before the horse. I saw this in theaters with a big crowd, and it was a time. It's Freddy versus Jason. It's the Godzilla versus King Kong of franchise slashers, and it didn't happen until after 2000. It didn't happen until after Jason had gone to space and Freddy had been killed and then resurrected in the prequel to Scream. It's like this was never going to be let's take it seriously. And I've never gotten with because I've heard it both ways. I've never gotten with this theory or this interpretation that a lot of folks have that this well it really feels like a Jason movie with Freddy in it. I disagree completely. I think this is a Freddy movie that incorporates Jason. The whole thing is a celebration of both of them. But you know, I brought receipts. I'll get to my notes about how I argue and back up that this is a Freddy movie. But the thing of it is that this is it's can't take itself seriously. This is the Freddy Krueger answer to Jason X,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And it's as silly and wild and playing with the audience being aware. As much as it's doing everything it can to bring in newbies, to say to newbies, you don't have to have seen all these fucking movies. You don't even really have to have seen one of them. You just have to have a friend who's dragging you to this, and I guarantee you're going to have a good time. Go to the theater, get some popcorn, or have your friends over with pizza and beer and put this on. And it's a time. And for me, anyway, that's all it needed to be.
Yeah, and I think it is one of the like. Listen, there's not a lot of good things you can say about sort of the quality of the storytelling in this movie or the quality of the script of this movie. Like these are all points, and I think, like you say, it's gonna sound like that we really are sort of just stroking this film something chronic. But I think at every stage, I'm gonna be also criticizing the fucking shit out of it as well, because like the storytelling is generally pretty fucking terrible. The script's generally pretty fucking terrible. But one of the things the movie actually does really well is it does give you that sort of backstory briefly of both characters. You don't need to have watched all the Friday the 13th movies. You don't need to have watched the Elm Street movies. I mean, let's face it, things like probably slightly more Elm Street as well, though the majority of people who watch films will have a sort of working knowledge of of A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's one of those franchises that's just sort of reached the zeitgeist of cinema, isn't it? Like that you know, the majority of people out there will have some sort of knowledge about something that's happened in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies or the concept of what Freddy Krueger is. You know, so it didn't need to go into great depth and backstory about these characters, but it did it right at the start, and it gave you those flashbacks of, you know, previous Nightmare on Elm Street movies. We get a little bit of the backstory in there about Jason as well, slightly later in the film, but it gives that to potential new viewers, to people who potentially haven't seen anything from either of the franchises as well. So it does give you that little bit of service so that you can just come into this completely fresh. Having said that, I'm not convinced that Freddy vs. Jason as a movie as an advert for both these franchises, I'm not sure how many people it will have actually convinced to go and check out the rest of these films. Because I think if you were to watch Freddy vs. Jason and you were to sit there and think, you know what, I do want to go check out these films, so I'm going to start with A Nightmare on Elm Street. The first, the original, arguably the greatest one of them all. Tonally, it's so different to that film, where A Nightmare on Elm Street does take itself way more seriously, and of course, as that franchise goes on, it becomes much more closer to what we get here in Freddy vs. Jason, but it is tonally so different.
Sure, yeah, but we're talking about a 20-year gap
Yeah.
almost of release dates, right? I mean, the budget difference between these two at that point. That's essentially Freddy Part 8, right? And that's after Freddy's been a video game and Freddy's been a TV show. And God love him, Robert fucking England, man. The Brad Dourif of this goddamn thing. It's always been him, and we learned the hard way. It always has to be him. And it's the other thing about this, I honestly do think that this is a flick that could inspire people to check these other franchises out, if for no other reason than to say, Jesus Christ, look at the excitement around me about these two going head to head, and look at all these sort of winking nod moments that everybody else seems to be in on. I'm just curious. I've got to know. And then you start diving in and you see the huge differences. It's interesting. You mentioned before about a consistency to Freddy's franchise run that the Fridays franchise maybe doesn't have. I wonder if you're referring to a consistency of quality.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that the Jason franchise is much more consistent. Any fucking Jason movie, you're gonna be like, all right, what's gonna happen? Well, it's gonna be at a camp. There's gonna be a bunch of fucking horny teens. You're not gonna remember their names. Their names don't matter. Somebody's gonna get thrown through a window, or Jason himself will bust through a wall or a door like he's the fucking Kool-Aid Man. He'll have his face covered pretty much the whole time. He'll have fucking tools that like a gardener might have, and everything is going to be so unnecessarily creative. Everybody is going to be so stupid, horny, and not suspicious, and you won't give a fuck when these people get killed. You're going to cheer for it, and that's that. Let's go home. Let's do it again. You know, and they don't start fucking with that formula until they say, all right, what if Jason versus Carrie? All right, what if Jason takes a boat ride? All right, what if Jason gets blown up by the FBI and then he's a slug people are eating? Like, until it goes off the rails, it's frighteningly consistent.
I mean, I would still watch all of those movies. I would still go and see all those.
When I was a little guy, fuck yeah. When I was a little guy, I was a Freddy guy, you know, and I didn't even have to see a whole lot of the movies. It's like Heather Langenkamp says in New Nightmare. Every kid knows who Freddy is. He's like Santa Claus or King Kong. Even if you don't watch the movies, you knew who he was. And on the schoolyard, you talked with your buddies as if you'd fucking seen them all, even if you hadn't. And you had opinions about who was better, Jason or Freddy, and who would win in a fight and why. And I always was a Freddy guy because to me, Jason was boring. It was the same shit over and over. You know, he's just a big, you know, meat puppet. And as I got older and I started revisiting the Friday franchise, I started to have so much fun with those movies because there's so much you can count on with those. So that when it's like jazz, when they do start going off the beaten path, it never feels too crazy because you know the actual, you know, chord progression so well.
Yeah, you can literally play sort of Friday the 13th bingo, can't you? With every single movie that comes out, you just pick 9 different squares and be like, fill them up with something. This is gonna, like you say, Jason bursts through wall. Yeah, okay, I've ticked that off the bingo. You know, that you can definitely do that. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, you definitely have that sort of consistency when it comes to the Friday the 13th franchise. I will absolutely give you that. But yeah, I was definitely going more for a consistency of quality. I think was the point that I was reaching for. But you're absolutely right, and there is something to be said for that as well. I think when you're talking about specifically a franchise, you know, because a lot of the times, you know, when franchises evolve, you know, they maybe don't hit those same beats that fans do actually want them to hit, you know, and because Friday the 13th is sort of this wild west of just slasher films, and it's crazy, and you know, you've got all these characters who are making ridiculous choices, who are just saying like the wildest fucking shit, you know, you can then become and go and have a lot of fun with that. And I think that is part of the reason why the Friday the 13th franchise, especially amongst horror fans, did become so successful and is still so huge to this day, is because, you know, we can just have that much fun with the franchise. I'm gonna stick to my guns and just say, you know, Halloween's the best franchise out of the 3 of them. Sorry, it's I only.
Have I ever gone on my big fucking diatribe to you about Halloween 4 and how it saved the whole franchise and it's one of the best, most unappreciated installments in the series?
You haven't, but I'm just going to tell you right now, I 100% agree with you. So.
All right, cool. Come back next week because we don't have time for that shit right now. We're talking about Freddy versus Jason. Ian's already heard the word, and the word is good. Halloween 4, Return on Michael Myers. Everybody,
yeah,
give it another look.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's tons going for this film. There's tons of things you can take away from this film. We've just sort of barely scratched the surface. We've not gotten into any sort of detail. The thing is, as well, though, right? People are going to watch this film, right? You're going to the cinema to watch this. It's Freddy versus Jason, right? And we'll talk about content of the film very, very shortly, because obviously we're sort of skirting around the actual content of the film. But you've got these two huge franchises, two of the biggest franchises that horror's got to give, two of your most iconic villains that horror's got to give, and they're being forced together in this versus film. And I don't think anyone should have expected or could possibly expect this film to have any sort of level of seriousness to it, or even necessarily level of quality to it. And people will argue the level of quality. It's a fucking versus film, and so when has there been a versus film that's ever been done really fucking good? So it's, I think you kind of have to temper your expectations when you're going into a film like this.
Yeah, I don't do this off. Let me. That's not true. I do say this often. I don't think this is a hard and fast rule that always applies in every single instance. However, especially when you list up all of the specifics we've already listed about what this is and why it exists, it delivers exactly what it says on the tin. Freddy versus Jason. Guess what happens a lot in this movie? Freddy fighting against Jason. And they get creative with it. I mean, fuck me, I don't know. They go kaiju. They go pro wrestler with it. And I personally enjoyed the shit out of that. Everybody in the audience certainly did. We were screaming, we were laughing, we couldn't believe some of the bullshit that happens in this movie. And here's content for you. 3 minutes into the movie, we get boobs. And those are not the last boobs we will get. 2003, we weren't getting scared. We weren't getting skittish. This was a movie that came to play. And it came to play it's interesting. It was such a transitional period for horror. And the 2000s, the aughts, into the 20 teens, there were a lot of growing pains happening with horror. And so in a weird way, this is a very, very like 2000, sort of turn-in millennium celebration of that era's conception of 80s horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 80s horror happening in 2003. You can't have that. You can only have people in 2003 who love horror making their conception of 80s horror. But that's cool. It like again, it's on the tin. Freddy versus Jason. That's what they give us.
Yeah, it is what they give us, and there's a number of fight scenes between Freddy and Jason in this film, and like you say, that is, that final one, I didn't really time it to, but that final sort of like face off between them two, and obviously you've got our group of like central characters here who are sort of interjecting themselves into this fight here and there, but that goes on for like a really long fucking time. I think it's about 20 minutes, that big sort of final sequence where they actually sort of are battling away. And you're right, they go crazy, they go wild, there's some really dumb, stupid shit in there, but it's funny and it's fun and you enjoy yourself watching it, and Freddy's trying to kick the shit out of Jason, but the cart he's trying to wheel down gets stuck on a splinter, and he's trying to like shiggle it about, and it's just crazy, and he's there like thrusting moves in the air, and Jason's like flying all over the place. There's the section where they have the pinball sounds when Jason's like bouncing off all the walls, and it's everything you would, and this is where I would possibly say that this is, if I had to sort of be forced to say, is this a Freddy movie or is this a Jason movie, I would probably go with, this is a Freddy movie, and they've taken Jason into that sort of world. The majority of the film takes place in Freddy's hometown. The majority of the film centers around the fact that it's Freddy who's trying to come back and he's using Jason as a pawn. And, and then it's only really at the very end there where we're like, oh, okay, we're in Jason's world now. And that's right at the very end of the film. So I would go with it. This is probably erring towards more of a Freddy movie. Do you have an opinion on who won?
So this is also kind of fun because now when I first saw the movie, this was one complaint I had. I didn't like the ending because it felt to me like a cop-out.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is that the screenwriters have actually said in this really cool interview I read in Bloody Disgusting that everybody should search out. It's like a 20 years later retrospective that the screenwriters do. It's a real quick read and a really informative one. They speak about how the ending is like a Rorschach test because everybody has a different opinion about this. And invariably, if you believe Freddy won, it's because you're a Freddy fan, and vice versa. So when I first saw the movie, it frustrated me because I said, fuck these guys. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. It's a cop out. They're not making a choice because, yeah, Jason walks out of the water with his head in his hand, but then Freddy looks directly at camera and winks at us as if to say,
A lovely,
he only thinks he's one.
a fantastic
And,
fourth wall break right at the death of the movie.
oh, yeah. Gimme. Fucking Robert Englund is just, top of the game. Top of the game. You couldn't have anybody else do this. And it bothered me, but watching it last night, a couple of things have happened. I've had time to ruminate, and I like the idea that it's almost saying, well, Jason sort of won this battle, but the war's going on, and Freddy ain't worried.
Yeah.
Freddy knows how to come back. He's not worried about that at all. And so it's kind of fun to think, ooh, potential sequel, or even like, ooh, another fight coming up. But last night watching it, what hit me that never hit me before is that, you know, when Jason comes out of the water holding Freddy's head, it's very ethereal, a lot of mist, you know, the a lot of fog, and it almost seems dreamlike. And I said to myself, fuck me, what if this is just Jason dreaming again? And that's why Freddy's winking at us because, oh, no. He's in my dream right now. I'm just letting him believe this is happening. But as soon as he gets on that beach, his mother's going to like come up out of the sand and start bitch slapping him. And I'm going to grow my body back and start laughing in his face. You know, so it was a lot of fun to me to consider that for the first time. So if I have to choose my favorite interpretation of the ending, that's it. Freddy's won because that is Jason's dream we are witnessing. That's my preferred interpretation.
So you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there for me, because that's my interpretation of the finale, the final scene where Jason's coming out of that water. Like you say, it's for me it's quite clearly it is a dream sequence that's going on. It's such a stark contrast to, you know, what we've just witnessed. Maybe they're trying to give it away as like, oh, there's just been a length of time has passed, and you know, so now it's daytime and he's coming out of the water. But like you say, it's very misty, it's very foggy, it's very ethereal, as you said. You know, it's a perfect word for it. So that's always been my interpretation of it, is that Freddy was the ultimate winner. He got Jason back into the dream world, and you know, he's just playing his games with him in there. So that's what I choose to be. But you're right, it is one of those sort of. And it's quite a rare occurrence now in horror where you really do get that, where you get this, especially for a movie like this, to be able to have that sort of moment that really can sort of elicit as many different theories as you actually want. Literally, any horror fan can look at this and come up with their own theory, and you know, it could be particularly plausible because of the styles of worlds that these two sort of franchises have clashed and created. You could go off in any fucking direction. You know, they've joined the fucking multiverse. Why not? It's Freddy versus Jason. Anything can fucking happen. You know, you just get fucking Deadpool and Wolverine flying out the fucking portals, and you know, suddenly you've got a four-way, and it's just, you know, I'd watch that film as well, by the way.
I tell you what, I mean, I know it wasn't fated to happen because lawyers and rights and all that shit, but I would have been so down for Freddy versus Jason in hell with Pinhead as the referee.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would have been game for that. And then Ash from Evil Dead shows up. Who gives a shit? Get him in there. I don't care. It'll be fun.
Well, yeah, and now of course a comic was spawned off the back of this, which was, you know, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash from Evil Dead, and you know, and so I think that there's definitely a lot of fan service. Would you like to see more versus movies in horror?
Here's the thing. This turning out the way it did, even with its flaws, and we will get to flaws. I mean, we can agree there are some flaws, because there's the thing about this movie that's the most frustrating, and I can understand why huge Freddy devotees were so frustrated and disappointed in this movie. First of all, there was a lot of anticipation because they started working on this in fucking 1988. 1988! They, like, really put their nose to the grindstone and started trying to make this happen, and it didn't happen till fucking 2003, right? So I get that. It could have been better, especially with the human characters. The human characters, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
The team. We have a whole team by the time everybody gets together. You've got a cop, the blonde virgin final girl, the one black person in this entire town apparently, the nerdy guy, the sweet but dangerous heartthrob, and the Randy, the wisdom guy, the guy who has the lore, right? Mark, you have a, like, if you just think archetypes, you have a good team there. And especially watching it last night, I said to myself, I see the pieces of this and how if the writing was either better or if we just had more, because we know this thing was cut within an inch of its life between shooting and release. And there could have been a little more depth, just a little more depth in history with these characters and their relationships, and then they could have meant a little bit more, and the whole thing would have been a little bit more satisfying and had a little bit more quality. But again, I keep coming back to the argument I would make if I was the lawyer in court. It's Freddy versus Jason, Your Honor. These fucking characters don't have to matter. They're just here to serve the fucking function of the script. Because again, this is Jason part 11 and Freddy part 8.
That's it. You're it's spot on, because you're absolutely right in your analysis there, love. Specifically, I think for me that sort of first half an hour of the film where we really do seem to just be like rushing through, like, here's the characters, we're bringing the characters together, we're already knocking people off, we've already got death scenes happening, and shit's just going off, and it's coming at you left, right, and center. This film doesn't fuck about when it comes to those sorts of things. It's just like, right, boom, here we go, this is the film you're going to watch, and we're kicking things off straight from the fucking bat. And so you don't get that level of care for some of the characters, and the script around them is generally pretty poor. But you're right, at the end of the day, it's fucking Freddy versus Jason, isn't it? We're not here, this isn't fucking
Freddy versus Jason, man.
This isn't fucking Shakespeare we're talking about here, we're not here looking for Macbeth levels of, sort of storytelling. We're here to watch fucking dumb teens get killed in the most fucking imaginative, gruesome ways possible. And I'm sorry, but a guy being bent in half backwards by Jason folding a fucking bed in half is pretty fucking great.
That was like the movie throwing its dick down on the table. Like, it was a shot. I'm telling everybody in the audience lost their mind at that part because it was so early in the film, and it's such a ridiculous, over-the-top, creative kill. It doesn't skimp on the blood, and we get some more really fun, goofy, out-of-the-box kills throughout the rest of this flick that are loads of fun to see. And again, with a packed audience, had this huge reaction that's like being on a roller coaster and not screaming. It's infectious. And that's what this movie was made for. It was made to be seen at the theater with a bunch of people who were just there to have a good time. I mean, this is something else that I'm pretty sure from listening that I know Candy does not care for Bride of Chucky. To me, Bride of Chucky, just like Halloween 4, fucking saved that franchise. Jennifer Tilly is the injection of new blood combined with Ronnie Yu and his sensibilities that and also embracing Don Mancini and everything he actually has to offer that catapulted that thing into its new life. And yeah, sequels after that may have gone like straight to video. No, sorry, Seed of Chucky got theatrical run, but after that we get straight to video. But those movies fucking rule. And the TV series is outstanding. And the only one that sucks is the 2019 one that I won't get into an argument with you about, I promise. But
thank God Nico's not here.
Terrible. I know that movie's fucking terrible. And it's okay. That's my Chucky rant. But it's Ronnie Yu has this great sensibility for late 90s, early 2000s American horror comedy, because that's the other thing about this movie. It's kind of like it's a fucking horror comedy. It's ridiculous. You have all these over-the-top moments, like when the fucking cop rolls up. By the way, I love this guy, Lachlan Monroe, as Deputy Stubbs. His shirt is always just a little too small, and it cracks me up that nobody acknowledges it or talks about it. It's just part of the weirdness of the movie. But he pulls up in the fucking rain, because it's always raining in this goddamn movie, and they come running out, freaking out, all covered in blood. And he's like, "Do you need assistance?" Freaking Catherine Isabel with blood all over her hands and totally naked except for a raincoat screams, "What the fuck?" Again, everybody in the audience lost their minds laughing. This movie is like every character is secretly on cocaine all the time because they're so like angry and emotional fucking out of nowhere. And it's fucking hysterical. And those two actors in particular, every one of their lines is perfect, even especially the stupid lines. Catherine Isabel, she's a fucking icon.
Yes, yeah.
For everything that she's gone on to do. But she's so good in this movie, and this movie's so dumb, but it's like a great fun dumb.
She hates this film so much. She's done interviews and talked about this film since filming. She did not have a good time filming this. Her and Ronnie Yu did not get on one little bit, which I have a little bit of trivia on for later on for why. I'm sure for a lot of horror fans will probably be already aware of it, but I love Catherine Isabel. Ginger Snaps is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies. She's so fucking incredible in that. She's also great in things like American Mary, like same slightly more recently. She's just fantastic. She is an absolute horror icon, and she's not in this movie for particularly long. She's one that gets knocked off relatively quickly in that absolutely fucking batshit insane outdoor field rave that they have going on. One thing I actually love about
cornfield rave.
Yeah,
cornfield rave. With your glow sticks and your Jack Black impersonators, you get it. Let's do it all. I love that shit. It's so stupid.
One thing I will say about that scene is like this huge fucking murder spree happens. Jason gets the majority of his fucking kills from this one scene. He's just going around slicing and dicing all these fucking kids, and at the very end of the scene, every single person's like, "I'll just take me home. I'll just go home." And they just fucking go home. None of them go fucking running off to like find police. None of them go fucking running off to like their parents. None of them go running off, to try and find help or care or try and stop them. They just all go home. They just drive the fuck home and are like, "Okay, I'll just go to bed." It reminds me, there's the scene in Hereditary, for anyone who's not seen it, when Charlie's head gets decapitated, and what does the guy do? He just takes her home and then goes to fucking bed. That's what these fucking characters do too. It's absolutely insane. It's so insane.
Now, Ian, this might be a situation where we simply have a cultural barrier that we need to overcome. In America, we have this principle that we all learn at school. It's called snitches get stitches. We don't call the cops. That just gets us into more trouble. You remember the great film from 1985, Return of the Living Dead, when they said, "Oh my God, the dead are rising from the grave. We got to call the cops." And the dude with the mohawk says, "No way, we can't call the cops. They're just gonna kick our ass." That's true. That's true. I don't care. I'm not calling the cops on Jason. They're just gonna show up and fucking shoot some unarmed black person walking down the street. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Oh,
I can't have that on my conscience.
Well, speaking of that, we've got Kelly Rowland in this film.
Oh shit! Are we gonna just jump right to the problematic? Are we gonna get there, or is it too early? No,
I don't think it's too soon. There's some problematic stuff that happens out with Kelly Rowland as well in this film. But Kelly Rowland's in this film. She has some unsavory script work to do in this film. Actually, on the flip side, Catherine Isabel, who's went on and said, she really didn't enjoy this film. She thinks this film's a pile of shit and blah, blah, blah. Kelly Rowland's actually been the total opposite. She said she fucking had a blast filming this. She loved filming this. And I just wonder if...
She also... Oh, no, go ahead, sorry.
No, carry on. That was my point.
She had also said that she was not a big horror movie fan because horror movies scared the shit out of her when she was young, so she could never get into them.
Yeah.
But this was such a fun experience that it kind of inspired her to start getting into horror. Yeah, it's so funny that Catherine Isabel hates this movie because I looked this up and this is a fact. Every line delivery she gives in this movie is perfect.
Yeah.
Every single fucking line is so fucking funny. Like when they're all, dude, you said you were gonna cut back on cigarettes. Well, hey, I only smoke when I drink. Yeah, but you're always drinking. Yes, so I'll work on that next. Just boom, ba, 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 ba. Like she just gives it just the right amount of wrist, you know. Oh my god, this woman. So that cracks me up. But yes, no, there is a very unfortunate f bomb
Mm-hmm.
that Kelly Rowland gives in what I think, I don't have this confirmed, but I think this was an ad-libbed speech. I think this was the director saying, "Hey, we're not going to do what's in the script. Just kind of tell him off. Just tell Freddy he sucks and he's a dick and fuck him, or just kind of go riff, and we'll use the best bits of it and cut it together, because then you'll turn and look and Jason will hit you." Because originally, not to jump trivia on you, but originally the screenwriters had written that she was going to deliver the same speech Nancy delivered in part one,
Mm-hmm.
where she says to Freddy, I take back every bit of fear I ever gave you. I take back all the energy. You're nothing to me. But that she was going to be saying it to Jason,
Yeah.
thinking that that would work. And then Freddy was gonna say something like, wrong guy, bitch. And then Jason would kill her. And I honestly do think not only would that have been a better moment, I think it would have been really satisfying to fans, and I think newbies wouldn't have been alienated. I think they would have found it funny. Um, it's weird. I honestly think Ronnie Yu in a interview when he was asked about this, he kind of threw up his hands and was like, well, I mean, no one ever said, hey, this is offensive, we can't do this. Now, the screenwriters did. They fucking spoke up after the first screening, because they didn't fucking write that, and they didn't like it, and they thought it dragged the movie down and put an ugly stain on the flick to have that in there. But nobody listened to them, because that usually happens to screenwriters once
Yeah.
a movie starts shooting, let's be real. And Ronnie Yu was like, I mean, nobody fucking made a deal about it at the time.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, and this is just me reading it the way I'm reading it, this is a guy who mostly made films in China and Hong Kong before coming to the States. And so in kind of an uncomfortable way, here's a guy holding a mirror
Mm-hmm.
of our American society circa 2000 up to us. And he's basically saying, listen, everything that I've come across since I've been here, working here, says that this word is vulgar, but not like it's the N word or something.
Yeah.
Like it's not.
No,
It's a dirty word, but it's not like you people, like, you
Yeah.
Americans, you use it a lot. So, and I kind of sit there and say to myself, yeah, we really weren't there yet.
Yeah.
People forget this was right after the 90s ended, and the 90s wasn't the best time.
No, and you know what? I think that would extend beyond like US as well. I think the UK would definitely be included in that as well. It's something that you knew wasn't the right thing, but you would hear it getting thrown about all the time, and it was definitely it would definitely extend out to here as well. It is unfortunate that it's been allowed to sort of stay in there. One thing I will say is that I really hope that sort of whole diatribe that Kelly Rowland gives was unscripted, because if that was the scripted one, then they need to fire that script writer. Like they need to go and find them.
No, they've been they've been adamant about this. They've been adamant about this ever since the movie released. They were like, we didn't write that, we didn't like it, and as soon as we saw it in the first screening, we complained, and no one listened to us. It's like, not only is that their story, but that's been their story every time they were asked about it. Like, not one word has changed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's still in there, and it is a shame. And obviously, like that's the sort of thing that we don't condone. It's not acceptable now, in especially in 2024. There's no place for things like that. There is also just to sort of we'll maybe get into a bit more Kelly Rowland stuff. In a second, I just want to sort of quickly bring up. There is also this sort of like really uncomfortable moment as well when Catherine Isabel's character Gib is in her dream sequence where she makes her comeuppance, and there's this guy that's like forcing himself upon her as well. That's a little uncomfortable. I'm not really like that's not great either. So I do want to sort of just point these out very quickly. These are because this is stuff that people bring up quite a lot when we're talking about Freddy versus Jason, that there's these sort of uncomfortable moments in these films. And you also have this sort of abusive relationship as well that Catherine Isabel's character is in, obviously very briefly right at the very start of the flick, but she's very clearly in a very abusive relationship with this guy, who is very controlling, who is shouts and screams and belittles her. So there's definitely quite a lot of sort of problematic issues that are highlighted and dealt with in some interesting fashion, I would say.
I suppose everybody is going to react to different moments in different ways, but the relationship, the toxic boyfriend there at the beginning, that honestly always felt very Freddy to me. Young people, all of us make very poor choices at times with relationships. We sometimes fall into self-destructive cycles, usually because it's a either repeat or reaction to the destructive cycles we see our parents putting themselves through, because that's usually where we learn this stuff. Again, I'm making generalizations and painting with broad strokes. So I feel like that actually is really good as far as informing this character, showing this character who's kind of in a place where she's struggling with where she's at and who she is. And so when we go into her nightmares, that's a main feature. The dude, fucking staring out from the cornfield, chastising her about her drinking and yelling at her to follow him. And then the repeat of that line, "Don't make me ask twice."
Yeah.
That's a very, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, we don't see him hit her
No.
ever.
No.
But I feel like enough pieces of the relationship are given to us to indicate that probably has happened at one time or another. But she is still going to follow him upstairs. And she even recognizes that this is stupid. I shouldn't do this. Let me grab a few beers and I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the more nuanced and kind of grounded real choices. I would definitely agree that the Power Man 5000 getup that we have from the dude that's forcing himself on her at the cornfield, there's just no excuse for that outfit he's wearing at all.
No, there's not. And like you could have still had, like, I feel like that was just an unnecessary thing to have in the film, to be honest with you. She could have just sort of slipped into a dream sequence in the cornfield. That's what happened anyway. And then Jason literally could have just came along and just been like, boom, there you go, she's gone. And you could have had the exact same effect. I just don't think it didn't add anything. Whereas, like, I agree with you as well with that with this sort of abusive boyfriend storyline. It's the only part of the film where you can say it actually has some sort of level of layers, and so it gives us some sort of insight into specifically Catherine Isabel's character as well, of what she's going through and things like that. So in a bizarre way, it makes sort of her the only real one that you actually care about, and she's the one that gets.
Seriously, she's the closest thing. Yeah, she's like the closest thing to a fucking character in this, this movie.
And it probably is down to that.
The thing is too is that you could have even had that moment, like that awesome kill where they both get stabbed at the same time, which that's the thing. We have lots of Freddy shout-outs in like that run of moments from his previous films earlier in the movie and things like that. But there's a lot of like visual Jason shout-outs where, he's stabbing the two people with the one thing. You could have still had that happen even if that raver wasn't forcing himself on her.
Yeah.
He could have just stumbled upon this passed out girl and kind of walked up and been like, oh shit, and maybe he turns and is about to say like, yo, I think we need some help over here, because like give us that attitude of like, no, we want to drink and get fucked up and party, but if somebody has lost consciousness, okay, no, that could be a medical emergency. We're not so drunk we don't recognize that. Like, you could literally just have him do that, but then get stabbed in the back by Jason and fall forward so that he's like almost on top of her, so that they both end up getting stabbed at the same time, and then he flings the dude, because it looks so fucking good when he gets flung across the cornfield and goes flying like a goddamn Looney Tunes cartoon.
They do that quite a few times in this movie as well, and it's one of the good things, I think, going back to Kelly Rowland as well, when it happens just after she drops that fucking F-bomb, and she just gets fucking flung, like it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. And I think it happens to Linderman as well when they're in like the cabin as well. He sort of gets flung, and that's how he meets his demise in the end. They do that quite a few times in this movie, and I think that's great. I think that sort of level of just cartooniness, but also kind of like brutality at the same time, is just perfect for what this movie was going for as well. So I really do love that as well. How do you feel like, so we're sort of just speaking about there as well, about these sort of visual shoutouts as well, but if you're taking this sort of as a total, we're doing this as a versus movie, and obviously we get quite a lot of these the verses between sort of Freddy and Jason throughout the film. But the body count in this film is pretty high. It's pretty high body count for your sort of generic slasher film. But there's only one actual Freddy kill in this film. You know, the majority of them do get sort of attributed to Jason, and it does kind of fit in with the plot line of, you know, Jason sort of stealing Freddy's kills. He was brought back to sort of help people remember and sort of make people think it was Freddy doing these murders. But would you have liked to have seen a bit more, sort of a couple more sort of Freddy's creative dream sequence kills that you know we know and love him for so much?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. The body count, you know, disparagement or you know whatever between the two of them never really occurred to me until I started doing research to prepare for our chat and saw that a lot of people commented on that. And it had me going, oh, yeah, I guess technically he really only does kill one person. I guess I would have liked to have seen more. But honestly, more than Freddy doing actual killing, because, you know, in Freddy movies, the killing is very personal. It always happens in the dream sequences. In Jason, he always ends up having a higher body count anyway. And as you already alluded to, Jason is sort of the mad dog that Freddy is sicking on people throughout this thing. So in a way, he gets partial credit for the kills. What I would have liked more of, and this is really a budget thing, I think, I would have liked more of the stylish, specific Freddy nightmare sequences.
Yeah.
Because we do have some cool, you know, set design with the boiler room, but we keep coming back to that same place, and I mean, it's all washed in its red light, and uh, there's not the same kind of style and panache that you get in the Freddy nightmare sequences in previous films. So more than like a literal Freddy body count that went up, I would have just liked to have seen some more of those kinds of nightmare sequences.
I think for me it comes down to as well, and I think maybe Dream Warriors is possibly one of the best examples of this, where, you know, they're sort of tailor making what Freddy's saying and doing in the surroundings they are to these individual people. You know, I think you think back to like the puppets on the string, you think back to him coming through the sort of TV scene, you know, the welcome to primetime bitch, this iconic famous line, you know, and so on and so forth, you know, let's get high when he's got the needles for fingers, and you know, there's so many moments there where what he's saying and doing is tailored so specifically to the characters that he's killing off on the screen. That doesn't really seem to happen here when he's you know really pissed off and angry because Jason's stolen his kill for Catherine Isabel. There's nothing really specific to her character, and maybe it's because we just don't get to know these characters very well in this film for us to be able to maybe get super specific about this sorts of things. But and even in the one kill that he does get of is it Mark, I think his name is, when, you know, the bathroom sequence, yeah, okay, we get this sort of sequence in the bathroom.
It makes a pun. Freddy's back.
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of that, and I will give. There's plenty of that. There's plenty of Freddy's sort of quips and one-liners in this film. You know, who would forget how sweet dark meat. You know, like, I think it's just like
that's often listed as one of the more problematic moments.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I remember seeing that and saying to myself, like, all right, maybe I need to self-interrogate a little, because well, that does feel like a trashy remark. It didn't feel like an over-the-line offensive remark. But, you know, here I am, a fucking white dude.
Yeah,
like, maybe I need to self-interrogate a little bit.
It feels it feels very on brand for Freddy.
Yeah, it does. You know. So I don't know.
But yeah, so yeah, like I think that's what I would have liked to see. We get that one scene where he kills Mark and it's in the bathroom, but I don't like, yeah, you know, and Freddy comes back with as his dead brother, who I think obviously had maybe committed some sort of committed suicide and, you know, whatever, and but it still feels pretty generic to me in terms of like how a Freddy kill you would normally feel, and then even like the Catherine Isabel one, and then obviously when we go beyond that, it's more about him getting rid of Jason. So that sort of individuality kind of goes, and then we end up just getting this sort of like you said, like this red lighting boiler room sequence, and then boom, we get the green lighting. It's red versus green. The colors, just to let you know what side we're currently on and who we're currently focusing on.
Until we're in the van where it's blue, blue and green and red. It's funny when I thought back on the movie, that was something I had listed as a negative, as like this color correction that they and how obnoxious it was. When I watched it last night, I have to be honest, I was like looking for that, and I was saying to myself, I don't hate this. I mean, it's a simple choice, but it's effective and it's consistent, and I don't hate it. I thought I was gonna. Maybe that's the problem. Can we talk for a second about Freeburg? Because there's another one where you've got to give half the points to Freddy and half the points to Jason. Because Freddy turns himself in to a admittedly shit CG. However, I still love this. He's a fucking Alice in Wonderland caterpillar hitting a giant hookah, getting Freeburg down on that. Freeburg, by the way, is our Jason Mewes insert character. Not only did we want to have a Jack Black impersonator, excuse me, we also wanted to have a Jay from Jay and Silent Bob in this movie. So we got an actor to come and pretend to be that. And I'm over here going, I know I should be rolling my eyes, but I don't care. He's funny. He's good. He's good at doing that.
Yeah.
And then so he fucking stops everything. They're in the middle of a serious covert plan where they've broken into a high security mental institution in the middle of the night, and he's like, "Whoa, let's hang back and do a J." And here's the thing, I'm a professional pothead. Okay, I've got a card in every. Well, not on me, but I've got a card somewhere around here, and Sure, stop for a second and light the joint, but then keep walking with the group. You don't just sit there and sit down and just go, I'm just going to sit here in the control room. I don't know. Fuck it. You don't do that. You don't do that. Are you kidding? How are you ever going to order a pizza if you don't have any friends to help you with that process? You stay with the group. So yeah, Freddy turns into fucking caterpillar Alice in Wonderland weed guy, gets him just royally baked on Dreams hash, and then he forces him to eat him, not unlike Jason, and Jason goes to hell. The thing about this movie that I do appreciate is that there's all these little Easter eggs that don't call attention to themselves. If you're in the know, you know. If you're not in the know and a newbie, you're just like, well, that was fucking weird. And you just keep rolling with it. And so he's impersonated by Freddy, and this is really one of my favorite kills. He's got all the trank that they're going to use on Jason, and it's like all up in these fat-ass hypodermic needles. And they're like, Freeburg, come on, we gotta go. Jason is coming. He's like, back off, bitch. Come to Freddy. And he gives him both needles in his neck, and he pushes it down, and then realizes, oh, wait, it'll take a second for this to take effect, won't it? And with one swing of the machete, Jason chops his shit in two. So it's crazy because he's chopping a person in two, but it's a person that's being controlled and puppet mastered by Freddy. That moment is fucking awesome.
It is like that whole scene is just one big wild fever dream, isn't it? And you actually you took the next point just like straight out of my mouth, because that's exactly where I was about to come to next, because you can't not talk about this sort of moment. It's just so fitting with everything else that this movie seems to stand for, in that it's just absolutely fucking insane and wild, and why talking about character motivations and talking about character choices and what our characters in screen decide to do. It's so on brand for Freddy versus Jason. Like you say, for this guy in the middle of this absolutely huge operation they're doing to save themselves and to save their friends and to save the town from these two, huge iconic monsters, and he's like, well, I'm seeing this fucking caterpillar dude. I'm gonna stop and roll a joint, and we'll maybe see how things go from there.
That's the other part of it too. He doesn't just get he gets the fucking hookah hit blown in his face, And then the Freddy caterpillar crawls away.
Yeah, he
And he follows him. He's like, "Yo, dude, wait up!" And he follows him. It's so stupid, but it's great. The movie has a few of these. I think a lot of movies have like one moment like this where it's a potential jump the shark moment, where it's this attitude of, "Look, this is probably the weirdest, most reality breaking thing we are going to ask you, the audience, to accept. But if you accept this, the rest of the movie is just going to keep being so much fun. But some of you are going to hate it, and it will cause you to hate the rest of the movie." Some movies have one of those moments. Freddy versus Jason is just a whole bunch of those moments.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments where, like, I remember being in the theater and almost everybody was like, "What? All right, fuck it. We don't care. Give me more." And really, the moment where he crawls after him as if to say, "Whoa, that was some good shit. Come back." That was the moment that got anybody who wasn't convinced. That was the moment where everybody who wasn't convinced said, "Yeah, all right, that's fucking funny. Give me more."
Yeah, no, I've always been kind of just like on board with that whole scene. It's never been like one of those moments for me. I mean, like, I'm generally on board with this whole fucking film. You know what? You know these characters are fucking dumb as fuck from the literally moment one. You know, we get that opening scene. And we've got this girl who no one really sort of knows who this girl is, but she's like backing away and she's like, "Oh shit, he's behind me, isn't he?" You know, and she reaches back and it's the tree. And then not 2 seconds later does the exact same thing again, and you're just like, okay, from that moment and that really small bit of detail, we know fine well these characters don't know fucking shit. These characters are dumb as fuck. They're gonna do the dumbest fucking things. They're gonna be like, "Oh, well, we should break up and cover more ground," kind of characters. You know, these guys don't have a fucking clue what they're doing, and we get that from minute one. I think if you for some people who maybe didn't spot that, like, what that small, just that one little small detail gives you all that information, everything you need to know about this film and about the people, the characters are human characters in this film.
And this comes back to something I don't like about the movie, and the screenwriters have talked about this too, because it had to be. We mentioned this before. It got chopped and chopped and chopped till they could get it down under 2 hours. And because of that, a lot of the story and a lot of the character development and a lot of the reason for things getting pushed to the next step just get chucked to the side, and you just have somebody scream out a bunch of bullshit like, "Oh, that's right. I had to get Jason to start killing for me, but he just won't stop." It's like, we don't need that. What are you doing? Are you worried people just like weren't paying attention? Like, come on, man. And I'm sure that if we had some other scenes, that either wouldn't have been necessary or it would have been massaged in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Same with when, like, they're back at school and Kia is all, "What the fuck? They're saying that Blake killed his dad and then killed himself? They're trying to put it all on him like it was some sort of murder-suicide. It don't make no fucking sense." And I'm over here like, where did this come from? Oh, right. The movie thinks that we have to, like, get past this. And part of me is going like, movie, we don't care. You could have just forgotten about this completely and had them just go, "Oh shit, what's going on? I guess it's Freddy. Oh no." We would have been fine with it.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing I don't like about this movie, is that it has moments like that where it's like, "Oh shit, we cut like 4 scenes." Just have somebody scream out in a big moment of emotion that feels like it comes out of nowhere. Have them scream out the 5 or 6 plot points that those 4 scenes explained, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as when she's like, "Wait a minute. Freddy was killed by fire and Jason was killed by
How can we use this?
How can we use that?" Oh my god.
Can I just say, can you believe though that Kelly Rowland's acting career didn't take off the back of this film? You know what, like, I feel really bad for the people involved in making this film. You know, apart from Catherine Isabel, because she's at least I think she's at least sort of self-aware, and like she's self-aware to the fact that this is a piece of fucking shit. Kind of feel bad for Kelly Rowland because she seems like she just did have like a really good fucking time filming this, and she really enjoyed the experience, and she like had fun. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, when we're doing all these sorts of things, we podcast because it's fun to do, you know, and people have hobbies because they're fun to do.
Yeah.
I'm glad she had a really good fucking time filming this movie. However, it's like I say, scenes like that, like and then you go extrapolate that. I think it's just the wider acting in general in this film is the standard is low, and that's being generous. Like the standard of acting in this movie is fucking horrendous, you know, and that includes, and I'm not, and for as iconic and as much as we love him, and he's one of the biggest sort of horror icons of all time, that includes Robert Englund in this film. This is not a great portrayal of Freddy in this film. I'm very I'm sorry.
Monster.
He
How dare you?
he has some. What I'll give him is he has some really he has some of his absolute classic sort of Freddy quips, one-liners. You know, that scene where, you know, it's Kelly Rowland's character in her dream sequence, and, you know, got your nose, and he just like flicks it off with his two fingers. And again, absolutely horrendous CGI. Great visual though, like that's peak perfect sort of Freddy. But in general, like, you know, we know what Robert Englund's capable of, and we know how sort of campy and comedy, you know, Freddy got towards the end of the Elm Street franchise. And that's obviously very much where we've leaned into here. But, you know, I just think that, like, this is also obviously the final on-screen performance we're gonna ever get of Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. You know, he's retired the role, and, you know, in the remake we had Jackie Earle Haley doing it, and I will never be satisfied, and I always think it's such a letdown that this is how he went out.
Here's the thing. I personally, and I mean, you know, perception is reality. We all choose these sorts of things. I feel like we got the best of both worlds because 9 years before this, or 10 years, whatever, 93, 94, 94, we got New Nightmare. And New Nightmare for me was such an outstanding send off to the Freddy character, to the Freddy mythos, to Robert Englund as an actor, and to the greater what's the word I'm looking for? You know, the greater possibilities
Mm-hmm.
of what Freddy could be. Because in that movie, he almost starts becoming like fucking it.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like he's this demonic force that feeds on fear, but he takes different forms. And it's just that we, the audience watching the movie, only have come to know him as Freddy, but he's had many names,
Yeah.
right? That was epic and awesome, and that could have been the last one. But everybody since '88 wanted Freddy versus Jason, and if you were gonna do it, you had to have Robert Englund.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so we get, you know, after we've gotten the very serious, very operatic, we're taking this to new depths of terror, Freddy that we got in New Nightmare, we also get campy, goofy Godzilla versus King Kong version of Freddy in Freddy versus Jason. And it just felt like a celebration and a great time and a goof. So for me, it's awesome because we get both, and I kind of see them both as his final go with the character, if you will.
Yeah.
But I totally grant this is my chosen perception.
Yeah, it's one of those. Again, it is very much. I feel like this. We can sort of throw this sort of out to pretty much any aspect of this film. It is what you make of it, isn't it? Like, this entire film is what you make of it. If you're going into this film ready to sort of pick it apart and, you know, be a bit serious about it, you're just not going to have a good time with this film. If you go into this film being ready to just be like, right, what the fuck are you going to throw at me? Give it to me, all you fucking got, and all its craziness, from like we've said, you know, people being split in half, to, you know, fucking Alice in Wonderland Caterpillar Freddy Kruegers, and all everything in between. If you're prepared to just go in there and be like, right, fucking throw it at me, let's have a blast, then you're gonna have a blast. I think for me with that, and I appreciate your point there, but I think just given the grand scheme of Freddy Krueger, what Freddy Krueger has been for horror as a character, and Robert Englund by extension, you know, as the icon he is, I think I would have liked to have seen him go out sort of more on and it's probably me being a bit fantastical because I don't think any of the Nightmare movies really sort of got close to Dream Warriors, once Dream Warriors had been released. But I would have liked to have seen him get something like that sort of send off, a Dream Warrior sort of style Freddy movie. That's where I would have liked for it to be at. But maybe I'm asking for quite a lot there because that's the best movie in the franchise. So I'm just asking them to recreate their greatest movie for him to send him off.
Well, especially if you're gonna. Yeah, if you're gonna do it with Robert Englund, especially at this point, it's got to be like Logan or John Wick or some shit, where he's like old. Maybe he's got a daughter who's getting into killing, and he visits her in her dreams to kind of encourage her to be a killer, but to be smart about it. Don't make the same mistakes he did. And so she, almost like in part 2, Freddy's Revenge, she starts to like take on a bit of a Freddy persona as he influences her through her dreams. And maybe we, the audience, can get tricked into wanting her to resist and just live a normal life, but knowing that it'll be so badass if she just gives in. And the movie tricks us into wanting that. Like, it would have to be him passing not the torch, but the glove.
Well, I mean, I hope I'm not pissing on some of the trivia I know you've got for later on. But I think it was one of the sort of original ideas for the script was that they were gonna work it so that Freddy was Jason's father in this, and that
I didn't know that. No, I had no idea.
I think they went through I think it was 18 sort of script rewrites for this film and the sort of various plot lines and things like that. And one of them was that at some point down the line, because apparently, Crystal Lake and Springwood, Ohio are about 2 minutes, or about a 5-minute drive away from each other. So,
oh fuck, do we have to talk about this? Do we have to talk about this? The original idea was that they had to drive all night. They had to drive all night to make this happen, and they had to keep a Jason fucking drugged in the back of the van. But they weren't able. They had to cut all the parts where it was like, fuck, man,
we're still
get some donut sticks. No, bro, we can't pull over and get donut sticks. We have Jason in the back. What about gas, bro? Like, they had to cut all that. Because, part of me is over here going, that would have been cool.
But yeah, so one of the original script ideas was that Freddy, whilst alive, had a relationship with, a consensual relationship with Jason's mom, Mrs. Voorhees.
Holy shit.
Pamela Kruger, we could have almost had, and it was going to be somewhat. It was going to be that he is actually Jason's father in this film, and you know what? Like,
Jerry Springer episode, fucking out of nowhere, right?
Jason, I think
he is the father.
Jason just gets up all angry with the machete.
Throwing chairs.
So yeah, I think again, that concept alone is very much on brand as well. Of just just throw fucking anything at us for this film. Speaking of Jason though, and I'm pretty much done with most of my points, and then I'll let you have the floor for anything else you want to add on. But we've got Ken Kersinger in this movie who is portraying Jason. Obviously, that was somewhat controversial because everyone wanted Kane Hodder, and we didn't get Kane Hodder. And the reason we didn't get Kane Hodder is because Ronnie Yu thought he was 3 inches too short, and that Ken Kersinger was 3 inches taller than him and therefore more menacing. I don't think Ken Kersinger did a bad job here. I think he's perfectly fine as Jason, the Jason we get in this film. So absolutely taking nothing away from him. But I think if you're gonna not have the absolute fan favorite of Kane Hodder, I think for me that's just like such an easy win to get people on board. You can't have, for a movie like this, like you said, it had to be Robert Englund. If it was anyone else who was going to be Freddy, this thing just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't even have come close to working. Obviously, that is slightly different for Jason. It's a non-speaking role. We're playing this big sort of hulking character, but it's such an easy win for me to get people who are skeptical about this concept on board to have just had Kane Hodder. If you wanted him to be 3 inches taller, you're not telling me they couldn't put like 3-inch lifts in his fucking shoes, and
It's camera. It's camera. You can do anything. Yeah. 3 inches. Fuck yourself. Yeah. Here's the thing. The screenwriters also spoke about this in the interview that I read, and they basically said, look, you have to ask the director in the studio, but they were really hot about making more of a height difference between the two and having a Jason who was taller, but also Kane Hodder deserves as high a paycheck as Robert Englund.
Yeah.
And so and they don't come right out and say this, but bit of an insinuation, and these things always slash off and come down to money. It seems to me that the bean counters at the studio said, we can't get away with making this without a Robert Englund.
Yeah.
We could probably get away with making this without a Kane Hodder because, again, we're trying to pull in some newbies. We're trying to pull in some casual fans. And the casual fans, especially in 2003, people weren't nearly so internet savvy as they are now. You know, people always forget this was 21 fucking years ago. Things really were different. It's not that the internet didn't exist. It's that it wasn't everywhere.
No.
It wasn't in our pockets. And so, like, the notion of, well, it's not the right Jason actor. And you'd go, well, what, like it's the same Jason it was the same actor in every Jason movie, just like with Freddy Krueger? Well, no, not until part 7. But part 7, 8, 9, and 10, it was the same guy, and they didn't bring him back. Okay. But the thing of it is that if you're in the know, you're over here like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's Kane Hodder. You fucking idiots. It's Kane fucking Hodder. You could have also made him the stunt coordinator, and you would have saved money because that's how good and experienced he is, man. And you would have had so much goodwill from fans. You would have had so much more marketability about this. There would have been those moments of inspiration where, like Robert Englund, an actor who has done a role so many times will come up with things that the writer, director, producer never did, and they'll say, fuck, that's genius, and they'll incorporate it, and the fans will love it. And where does this really pay off? It pays off in people coming to see the movie multiple times, and it pays off in the physical media sales. Because back then, that was a fucking huge part of this. It wasn't just box office. You couldn't stream this shit. If you loved it, you wanted to buy it or rent it on DVD or Blu-ray or what the fuck ever. And if they had invested in Kane Hodder, I think it would have gotten them lots of money after the fact.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. Horror has always had this issue of saying, let's make it fast, cheap, and dirty, baby. And we're going to cut corners wherever we can. And this movie certainly did that. And in my opinion, that was the biggest reason why they didn't get Kane Hodder, because they were like, we can pay any fucko to put on a hockey mask and do this.
Yeah.
Kane Hodder deserves a higher paycheck. Frankly, he deserves as high a paycheck as Robert Englund. They didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and like again, I just want to say, like, Ken Kersinger does a fine job in this film. Like he is.
Yes, he does. Yeah, I'm not saying he's bad. He's great. He does a marvelous job.
Yeah, but you're right. You know, like Kane Hodder would have absolutely been demanding a higher fee than Ken Kersinger would have. But you're right in everything you say there, because like you say, we weren't talking about, you didn't get money for streaming this. You know, you didn't have, you know, Amazon Prime fighting for the rights to show this movie, or fucking Netflix or anything like that. And you know, the success of movies used to also, like, yes, obviously you'd have your box office, but you would also find out, you know, about rental sales. How many times did people rent this movie from fucking Blockbuster Video and shit like that? That's stuff that all used to get incorporated into things. And then, yeah, like you say, physical media at the end. I think this movie is, this movie's made money. Like, let's not get, like, don't get me wrong, this movie did make money. This movie didn't make anywhere near as much money as it should have. But you're also right as well. The people back in the day, you know, we're talking about 2003 like it's some sort of fucking, you know, yesteryear, you know, the days of yore and stuff like that. But you know, back then, you know, horror movies didn't make a lot of money, and horror movies have traditionally not made huge amounts of money. Even the big sort of success stories, if you think back to some of these things, like you know, we mentioned Halloween earlier and how little that movie was made for, and that movie made a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. In terms of movies, that movie didn't make a lot of money. It made a lot of money comparatively for what they paid to make the film.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. They make money because they are cheap to make. So if you can make one that hits, you make a ton because you barely spent anything making it. The first Friday the 13th, I mean, it's a great example. I mean, basically what's his name? Steve Miner?
Yeah.
Either Steve Miner or Sean S. Cunningham, I can't remember which one, have been blatantly honest about this. They were like, We saw Halloween and we said, how do we rip this off but not get sued? We'll put it in the woods.
I didn't.
All right.
I
Start shooting on Saturday.
I fucking love that shit, though. I absolutely love that shit. But, you know, and obviously, like, now in 2024, and probably for the last decade now as well, because we were going through this absolutely amazing period of horror where we're getting just, you know, absolutely incredible films coming out every single year. And as a genre, you know, it's taken so much more seriously now than it potentially ever has been at any other point. But we also have big blockbuster horror movies that make a shit ton of money. You know, you think of things like you mentioned sort of It, and you know that like, for as terrible as I think It Chapter 2 was, It and It Chapter 2, they made shitload of that, made so much money. And then you think again to like modern times, and you know, here it comes, my traditional episodic mention of the Terrifier franchise. You know how little money, specifically Terrifier 2. Nico, when he's listening to this, will be just rolling his eyes. But specifically Terrifier 2, and you look at the success story that was, you know, when that had its theater run, and I genuinely hadn't seen anything like it. I don't think ever in my life, where you have this movie and you got this limited theater run, and that was great for the franchise, even to get that limited theater run. It was because it was already so much bigger than what the original Terrifier got. Terrifier 3 is even more so, because you know neither first or second one got a theater release here in the UK, and Terrifier 3 is getting a theater release in the UK, and I'm very, very excited about it. And then it just, I don't know if you remember,
Ian, just so you know, I'm keeping track of how many minutes you talk about the Terrifier franchise. I am going to spend equal amounts of time talking about the Maxine trilogy.
That's fine. I'll cut this short in about 3 seconds. That's fine. But no, but like that when that was in the cinema, and you'll remember it as well, and it just kept getting extended and extended and extended, and it went on and on and on for what felt like an eternity at the time. Like, it just didn't stop. And that's the sort of success stories we're now getting out of horror in sort of in the 2020s, and you know, maybe a few years before that as well. But we didn't get that in 2003. You know, horror was not seen as being this sort of serious franchise or anything to be taken seriously. And you know, Freddy vs. Jason was never going to be the movie that convinces people to take horror movies seriously, but the money that it made was nowhere near the money it should have made, given the sort of component parts that this movie had. Because I think that's always the thing about, I will always sort of hold against this movie. For as much as I number one, appreciate the flaws, and there are many flaws and the drawbacks and whatever else, that this movie has so many parts that are right. From, you know, Freddy, from Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, from some of our characters, from, you know, like you mentioned it earlier as well about us having all these sort of trope, the common trope, like all these pieces are there, they're just not executed right. But because everything that happens in between all that is just crazy, it's insane, and I don't think that like there's no other words for it. They're just insane. The movie, for people like us as horror fans and people who love these franchises, we'll let them get away with that. We will, for the most part, Candy excluded, but for the most part, you know, we you know, we will go on the journey with them. We will let them take us on that journey. For a lot of people who aren't horror fans, they'll take one look at this and just be like, "What the fuck is this?" You know, that I genuinely.
Well, here's the thing: if you're not a horror fan or you're not horror curious, why are you even taking one sniff at Freddy versus Jason? It comes back to our very first point. It delivers exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And it's true though. This comes back to what I was saying before about Ronnie Yu and how I find it kind of fascinating the ways in which his American horror comedies are very much, in my opinion, a reflection of how he sees American popular culture and what it wants in its entertainment in the late 90s, early 2000s. And similar to how the sexual assault is an easy, lazy, dated choice, but it's a choice that got made a lot in the 80s and in these franchise films that this movie is such a celebration of and love letter to, or, you know, professes to be. And it's the easy, lazy choice to cut the character dynamics down and just have them spit out the necessary exposition so we can get on to the next thrill kill moment. It's the easy, lazy choice that usually would have been made in the 80s in these franchises. And what Ronnie, you didn't understand, and I think this is perfectly fine because it's a reflection of American popular culture at that time, is that we're past that. We can take a little longer to go a little deeper into some real human character stuff. And it really doesn't have to take that much time. You can do it economically. And it doesn't have to take away from the blood and guts. In fact, it will make us lean forward and react even more to the blood and guts. The whole Lindemann Kia thing, the pieces are there, and those actors aren't amazing, but they're good enough that with the right writing, we actually could have had this weird sort of history where the two of them have maybe bickered a bit. They've maybe got on under each other's skin since grade school, and no one's ever said anything about it. But finally, with this whole situation, they're pushed to confront the fact that they do have feelings for each other, and society doesn't think that's normal for the hot chick and the nerd to have feelings for each other. So they just kind of share in that for a second while the Jason Freddy thing is happening. And he tragically dies, and he finally gets to feel like a tough dude by simply telling her, go, get out of here, save yourself, I'll be okay. No, really, I will. And he gets to feel like a strong dude in that moment, and then he bleeds out. I mean, seriously, that's actually fucking emotionally effective, and it
Yeah.
wouldn't have taken that much work. But the thing of it is back then nobody cared.
Yeah.
Nobody cared if you put in that kind of work. You had to decide to do it, and then the audience would have reacted in a very positive way. This is how I view things. You can choose to agree or disagree.
No.
But Ronnie Yu, he's reflecting American culture, and at that time, nobody in American culture gave a shit. The same way nobody in American culture outwardly was giving enough of a shit about F-bombs and R slurs being used in popular media.
I think, and one of the things as well is like we have thrown a lot of criticisms at this film. We've stroked this film's ego a lot, and we've tried to be. I think we've tried to be relatively balanced, despite the fact that we clearly both kind of just love the fuck out of this film. You know, but these criticisms that we have, right, and these things that we're saying, this is done really poorly, this is done really poorly, had some of these been addressed and had some of these been actually like sort of fixed and put into the film, I think we would actually have a worse film for it, because it's not what it's not why we love it now. I think, you know, I think had we maybe gotten that right, let's just say we'd gotten like just what you just said there. You know, they because the parts were there for that sort of relationship between Kia and Linderman in this film, and let's just say that they got that right, and they fixed that. But that's it's kind of like one last thing for us to point at this movie and be like, haha, you got this wrong, or haha, like this is crazy. You know, I don't know if maybe if that's just a me thing and me just sort of wanting to watch the world burn with this film, you know, or you know, had they put in better CGI for, you know, the caterpillar Freddy Krueger, would that have been as effective? Because it's fucking terrible, but it's also one of the reasons why we love that fucking scene.
Well, you can fix everything you want with the character dynamics and the writing. You're not going to fix all this other shit.
Yeah.
Freddy with the sharp teeth. Now, I like him when he's all deviled out at the end, where he's like all bright red and he looks like fucking Satan Freddy. I enjoy that. But all the other moments where it's normal Freddy but with sharp teeth, hate it. Why do they do it? Waste of my time. Also, the cranking up on the frame rate in moments where people are getting killed, there's got to be a word for that. Maybe I already said it. Maybe that's all you say, cranking up on the frame rate. But whatever. You know what I mean? It gets all going really quick. I hate that shit. It looks awful. And maybe if they didn't do it, it would look even worse, and that's why they did it, and I just don't know enough to know any better. But it sticks out to me as a huge negative of the movie. Also, dumb 80-yard lines, like after Blake gets stabbed with the shadow, and then he realizes it's just a shadow that stabbed him, and so he's okay, and he runs out of the street. We hear him go, I'm okay, I'm not hurt, and then he runs out of the street. There's these little moments like that throughout the movie where it feels like the movie is like, hey, I know you're all stupid and you weren't paying attention, so here's a little thing. And that frustrates me.
Yeah.
And then the fire and water thing.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, please. Because the fire and water is a whole big thing.
It's just like you've gotten a bunch of NPCs together, isn't it, in a film, and been like, right, how would they script this? But yeah, take it away with the fire and water thing. Go for it.
Fire and water. All right, all right, all right. To an extent, I get it. It's a visual thing. It's elemental. We want to set up a split and a difference. Okay, fine, I guess. It's stupid for lore purposes because Jason and water has been like. I mean, you can put a rock on a chain and put him at the bottom of a lake, but that's because he can't move. It's not like he's scared to be there. He's gonna fucking in a violent nature that shit and just walk through the lake like it ain't even there. Um, so and I get it. And the screenwriters talked about this in their interview. They talked about how it's like, well, no, it's just that he drowned as a child. So if Freddy was in his nightmares, if there's anything Jason's even a little bit afraid of, it would be water related, and that's something Freddy could exploit. Still, I'm over here saying, y'all have a perfect choice that you're not using. His mom.
Yeah.
They use his mom at the beginning. They even use it in the middle. It would have been the perfect move, and it would have been a shout out to fucking part 2 and beyond when the smart final girls have sort of utilized the persona of Jason's mom to fuck with him, right? To stall him or what have you. Freddy could have used that in a Jason nightmare to really torture him, to really beat him down. And if it's mom doing it, then we, the audience, already know Jason is just a little boy right now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have even had to have a little Jason boy. You could have just had Ken Kersinger just completely change his physicality, go from Superman to Clark Kent and then down to a baby. It would have worked.
Yeah.
And it would have, in my opinion, been a better choice. But I don't know if it looks as good in a comic book sensibility and a visual flair the way Ronnie Yu was all about the fire and water thing. So that's where I'm at on it.
Yeah, it is, and like it feels. I think it possibly feels more underutilized in this because Freddy's already used it, in those opening scenes, because we've already seen it. I think had we just like not seen it at all, then I probably could have gotten a bit more on board with it. But it feels like to me it's like they knew that was an option, and made a conscious decision. No, we're not going to go with this really fucking obvious option, and the option that really makes sense, especially to people who are already fans of the franchise. Let's go with this as your choice again. Kind of like the Kane Hodder thing, pay a bit of lip service to the fans with this one, and let's go with the mother. Apparently they did ask Betsy Palmer to come back and play the role, and she refused to come back. So, which I kind of respect her for that as well.
It's still, it would have been really epic to write something really cool.
Yeah.
And to have a really badass older actress come in and just chew the scenery and fucking go there with it. Just to give a really great older actress some screen time and some ability to show off her chops. That would have been hot, and it would have been something that we don't see much in horror, and it really would have given this movie one of those things where people go, oh yeah, Freddy versus Jason. There were some wild, awesome choices. Did you all see the mom in that?
Yeah.
Who is she? Let's fucking Google that bitch. She was amazing.
So apparently, according to the trivia that I read, Betsy Palmer, who obviously played, for those who don't know, played Jason Voorhees' mother, Pamela Voorhees, in the original Friday the 13th movie in 1980. She was asked to reprise her role. She turned it down, apparently, because she felt the role was too small. So kind of what we're saying there, had they made it like the sort of focal point, had they made that the reason why and not this sort of elemental thing that we've got going on, we could have had, the original. And like you say, and I think that would have been nice as well for her to get that sort of, and me and Candy have talked about this quite a few times about these sort of actors. And I think it's been more, with the likes of sort of Vincent Price and Christopher Lee and people like that who really got these reprisals very late on in their career, and also post their deaths as well. How about there's this sort of renaissance of them and their roles and things like that, and how they really got that. And I think it would have been really nice for Betsy Palmer to kind of have a bit of that as well. When this came out, just as a sort of, hey, remember me, because to still, it sounds bizarre to us as actual horror fans, but to people who aren't familiar with horror movies, they think that Jason's the villain in Friday the 13th, and Jason's not. Spoilers for a movie that came out 44 years ago, but Jason's not the villain in Friday the 13th, you know, and I think it would have been really nice for her to be able to get that sort of, you know, recognition very, very late on in her life as well.
I never knew that she was like close to doing this movie.
Yeah,
It was
I mean,
the script really wasn't good enough. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
It would have been not only something that brought more people to see it, but it would have given this flick legs.
Yeah, and then if you can,
would have been through the roof.
Yeah, and if you combine that as well with like the Kane Hodder thing we're saying earlier, so then you've got this sort of trifecta there of Robert Englund, Kane Hodder, and Betsy Palmer in your three key roles. You have the three people that people want to see. The film, the levels of success that the film can reach, then change dramatically.
They should have invested because, like, if you need any kind of proof, look at the lines at the horror cons.
Yeah.
The hours that people, not freaks, not weirdos, huge groups of people will wait online for hours to give them more money just to take a picture with them.
Yeah.
Just to sign and shake their hand. Like, that's how much these people mean to the fans of this franchise. And no, I couldn't agree more. They left money on the table by not investing in making it Robert Englund, Kane Hodder, Betsy Palmer. And don't make it about water and fire. Make it about motherhood.
Yeah, exactly. It was just the easy option, wasn't it? Right. I'm very conscious of the fact that I said to you that I'll try and keep the episode relatively short, and we've already gone an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm just gonna, one last thing for me, is obviously Freddy versus Jason's film. No coincidence that the lead character, our final girl, if you want to call her that, is called Laurie. They had to have a little Halloween reference in there. It just they have to, right? But on that note, Newman, anything you want to add? Anything else you want to talk about Freddy versus Jason before we move on?
Are we moving on to trivia, or
we will be
like just movie stuff?
We will move on to trivia.
Oh, yeah, no, let's fucking do it.
Okay, let's go on and talk about some trivia. We'll start off with the finances of the movie, as always, and then I know you've got some trivia, and I'll let you fire away with the trivia that you've got, and then I'll come in with whatever I've got left at the end. So, according to IMDb, this movie had a budget of $30 million, which in 2003 for a horror film is a huge amount of money to be spending on a horror film, and also according to IMDb, its worldwide gross is $116.3 million. So this movie made money. This movie did make money, but the potential for this movie, because I feel like the potential of this movie should be what, like, some, and this maybe is actually going to be like the most bizarre thing I'm ever going to say on this fucking podcast, but I feel like the potential of this movie should be on the levels kind of that sort of like, holy fucking shit, this is so cool, we need to go and see this, of like some of your Marvel films today that come out, and you know, just people flock to the cinema to see that. Like, I mean, maybe not to that scale, okay? I'm maybe being...
It broke records.
Mm.
It broke records, right? And the thing of it is that Marvel money only happens in a PG-13 rating. You got an R-rated film, you've already got a cap on your box office. And it's interesting, you mentioned numbers. I've got that this was the highest box office opening weekend, not just for any horror movie, but any rated R movie.
Yeah. Until
2009, when the record was broken by Friday the 13th, written by the exact same goddamn screenwriters.
And can I just say as well,
like, it's yeah. So like, this was, I think, for what it was, I think this was very successful.
Yeah. Can I just say as well though, I actually really fuck with the Friday the 13th remake. I'm totally fine with that remake. I think that's an underrated remake. I think that gets more hate than it deserves.
It's funny, I used to really talk that one and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake up. Like, I would say, you know what, you didn't need to make these movies, but if you were going to, these are good versions of that idea.
Yeah.
And when I went back and rewatched them recently, I was like really underwhelmed. And I was like, these are ugly to look at. And everything visually cool that's happening kill wise is usually just a reference to something that happened previously in the franchise. The TCM one, I was like, just watch the original. Fuck this movie. I love Arlie Ermy, but fuck this movie. And then when I watched 2009 recently, I was like, the opening is kind of amazing. I almost wish that cold open was just the movie itself and nothing else. Because after that, I'm like, fuck this. Just watch every other Jason movie. Watch every other Jason movie. You get everything you need out of 2009. So it's funny. It's not that I think they suck. It's just that I used to talk them up quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather fuck with House of Wax.
Oh,
2005. That movie slaps.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that as well. But again, I think I could probably easily sit and talk for another hour about that as well. Who doesn't want to watch Paris Hilton get javelin speared through the forehead? So, anyways, I know Newman, you were saying you've managed to research a bit of trivia about this, so I'm gonna let you take the floor and go ahead with whatever trivia you've got, and then after that, if I've got any left, I'll just add that in at the end. So take it away.
Anybody who checks out the special features on this mofo is going to see an alternate ending that they shot where there's like a love scene happening between Will and Lori, and then much like Freddy 2, claws pop out of his hand and he's like, now I'm Freddy, let's go to the credits. And it made no sense and it had no explanation. It was just a cheap-ass way to have this final scare. And the director hated it, and the writers hated it, the studio demanded it, and the test audiences hated it. And so thank heaven they were allowed to change it. That is why we got our ending with Jason walking out of the water holding Freddy's head. And what's interesting is that depending on the source, either Ronnie Yu, director, takes credit for this whole idea, saying it was an homage to Apocalypse Now when Martin Sheen is coming up out of the water. Another source tells us that Bob Shea from New Line Cinema, this was his idea. I don't know what the actual truth is, but all love to Bob Shea. He's been known to be a bit of a bullshit artist.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna assume Ronnie Yu actually came up with this idea, because even when he says I came up with the idea, he also says, I mean, it's an homage to this other thing that someone else did.
Yeah.
And he credits that. So I'm more inclined to believe him. The final explosion at the end, right before Freddy and Jason get blown out to sea, and Lori and Will have to jump under the water. That's a real explosion with real pyrotechnics, and it really got out of hand. It blew up way bigger than it was supposed to. And the actors who played Will and Lori kind of like went under the water. They came up out of the water. They looked around, and everybody had this face like they had all shit their pants. They're like, are you guys okay? And they're like, yeah, are you okay? And thankfully everybody was okay. So director Ronnie Yu said, fuck yeah, that looked amazing. We're keeping that in the movie. Those are real stunt people getting catapulted off the dock and over the sea and into the water. Real stunt people on wires being like flung across the room, flown up out of the water and up onto the dock. These sorts of choices, in my opinion, do make this punch a little bit higher than some of the hate would have you believe. Brad Renfro was originally cast to play Will. However, he was struggling a lot with drug and alcohol abuse at the time. He showed up to set and was just in really bad shape, and they all sort of said, this isn't going to work. Yeah. So they did a pivot. Ronnie Yu had worked in 98, with John Ritter in Bride of Chucky, and he was like, oh, fuck me, John, don't you have a son who's also an actor with a dynamite smile? Let's get him in there. His hair will always be wet. It'll be great. And that's how we got young Jason Ritter in this here movie. The studio tried to make it PG-13. Did I mention this already?
No, I don't think so.
There was a lot of the Mike DeLuca, who ran New Line Cinema when this idea was pitched by these screenwriters, was a huge champion of the movie. He was instrumental in Jason Goes to Hell. He was instrumental in Jason Goes to Hell. So he was a huge champion of Freddy vs. Jason, and more specifically, this version of Freddy vs. Jason. However, early in pre-production, his ass got fired as head of New Line Cinema. And the new head made the screenwriters essentially prove all over again that this was a good idea and that this was worth their investment. And it was exhausting. And they did market research. They went and surveyed people in malls and teenagers and shit and said, would you be interested in a Freddy versus Jason? And the research came back saying, yes, we do want to see a Freddy versus Jason, but we think it should be PG-13. I'm sure that Freddy and Jason fans said that, and it's not just the studio saying, we'll make more money statistically if we can make this PG-13, and then tried to make it sound like that's what the horror fans wanted. At any rate, didn't happen. All the creatives stuck to their guns. They kept it rated R, and we all know that was for the best because a year later we got Alien versus Predator, PG-13, and what a fucking shit show that was. And that's all my trivia. Thank you so much, Ian. You are a sweet, sweet person.
No, that's excellent. Can I just say there's only one movie I hate more than Alien versus Predator, and it's Alien versus Predator Requiem.
Fuck that shit. That's the only horror movie ever I could not finish watching. I got 20 minutes in and I was like, I can't see anything happening on screen.
It's so bad. It's so bad. But no, thank you very, very much there for coming up with some really excellent trivia there as well. So thank you very, very much. I just have a couple of pieces to add to that before we move on to our next segment. And a lot of these are about people who could have been involved in the film, but the first one I want to hit on, because I've already touched upon, there was some tension on set between Catherine Isabel and Ronnie Yu, so just will quickly just sort of explain that for people who don't know. It's probably one of the biggest issues that were actually happening on set during filming. Catherine Isabel, who had signed on to the film, had a no nudity clause in her contract, so she didn't want to film any nude scenes, and Ronnie Yu was not particularly nice and was trying to force her into doing some nude scenes, which is very not cool. And so eventually there was a lot of tension on set, and I think that's one of the reasons why she also feels like it was she didn't have a good time filming this. So I fully get that. That wasn't cool. That's really not cool. So just sort of throw it out there. I've already mentioned, I took it out of my trivia because I had to mention it earlier, but Betsy Palmer obviously was originally offered the role for Mrs. Voorhees, turned it down because the role wasn't sort of big enough. Robert Englund also gave his sort of big sort of thumbs up seal of approval for Catherine Isabel to get the role. He really sort of was instrumental in making her and helping her to get the actual role because he was such a huge fan of her in Ginger Snaps as well. So it's really good to see that people like Robert Englund really sort of recognizing really great performances in other horror movies as well. The original choice to play Laurie was actually Christina Ricci, which I think would have been an interesting casting choice.
That would have been nuts. That would have been another one of those things where you're like, holy shit, remember how the lead of Freddy versus Jason was fucking Wednesday Addams?
Yeah. But she turned it down. I think that was due to scheduling conflicts, but who knows? She might have looked at the script and been like, fuck this shit, I'm not being in this. And then final piece of trivia for me again, is around the director actually. So Ronnie Yu wasn't originally signed on to do this film. It was actually James Wan who was originally signed on to direct this. And again, that would have been a whole that would have been a whole different story. He didn't do it because he was already committed to directing Saw, and thank God. That's all I'll say. Thank God he was making Saw, because he did a really excellent job with that original Saw, and I don't think I'm really that interested in seeing a James Wan Freddy versus Jason. So
yeah, I don't care for most of his movies, and I've come around to the idea that it's like, you know what? Sometimes you just don't dig the way one guy plays, and that's okay.
Yeah,
I do not dig the way he plays. I don't like a single one of his movies that I can think of. I fucking hate the Saw franchise, and I'm over here in my head going, I love Bride of Chucky, and I really have a lot of affection for Freddy versus Jason. So there's something Ronnie Yu is doing, some kind of sauce he's mixing up that I just dig on.
I think most people do have like a director like that as well. Mine's is Mike Flanagan, and it's not that I don't really like what Mike Flanagan's movies. I just don't really. They're just not my bag. Like, it's not for me. And that much to Nico's disdain, because he despises the fact that I don't hate Mike Flanagan movies. They're just not my bag. But I think
I'm in a weird fucking place with Mike Flanagan where I like his movies. I despise his TV shows. Like, I fucking hate Midnight Mass and Usher and the House of
Bly
whatever
Manor,
it
yeah.
is. Yeah. Oh my God. Fuck that shit. Stop giving this alcoholic Catholic asshole all this time to be so insufferable and up his own ass. Just stop it. Just stop. Just do your Stephen King fucking adaptations. You're good at that.
Yeah, I will give him credit for that. He is good at that. Anyways, let's move on to our final segment now that that's out of the way, and let's do the ratings and the reviews. As always, we will start off with the critics' scores. So IMDb have Freddy vs. Jason rated a 5.7. It's actually a little bit higher than I thought IMDb would have it at. Metacritic has it more where I thought they would have it at, because they've got it at 3.7. The Rotten Tomatoes critics, it's 42%. The Rotten Tomatoes audience is 50%. So I think for me, that's a little bit higher than I would have expected them to have. I was anticipating that being a little bit lower. The critics' consensus is fans of the two horror franchises will enjoy this showdown, but for everyone else, it's the same old slice and dice. As always, we throw it out to our listeners and followers on social media and ask for your guys' opinions and scores. So here's just a few of them. Stephen Nash on Twitter gives it a 2 out of 10. It wasn't very good when it came out and was just as bad as I'd remembered when I'd rewatched it last year. I'd forgotten about the obvious J Muse rip-off character in it though. Moonlit Writing though says for the most part I loved it, so 8 out of 10. Fight scenes were brilliant. Jason was an epic badass and the plot was kind of clever. Downsides for me were a couple of unnecessarily offensive moments of dialogue and new unpleasant personality traits Freddy never had before, which we've kind of discussed earlier in the episode. Good friend of the show, Ren, gives she said for Candy it was 100 out of 10, but real answer was 4 out of 10. The ultimate what could have been. After years of begging for it, they chose the wrong director and tried to shoehorn the scream effect on it, which resulted in a near total letdown. The most positive note is this solidified Freddy is the ultimate baddie. Just a couple more for me. M. Cavino says it's a 7 out of 10 for me. It delivers on all fronts. Unfortunately, it's held back by some questionable CGI and the casting of Jason. Fans wanted Kane. This was meant to be a fan service film. Why deny them that? Such a stupid move. And then finally, the 253 says Freddy vs. Jason is like the ultimate showdown of the sleepover dares. It's basically like watching two horror legends have the world's deadliest pillow fight. With that said, I love this movie. So you can see there, though, like this is what we were sort of talking about earlier. Of like people, there's tons of people out here who hate this movie. There's tons of people out there that love this movie, but there's people on every single point. You know, there'll people be like, "This is the worst movie I've ever fucking seen. 0 out of 10. Like, I hate this thing." There'll be people out there being like, "This is fucking incredible. It's so insane. Like, just get fucking high and watch this movie. It's absolutely ace. 10 out of 10." But there will be people out there who'll be like 9 out of 8. You know, there's literally going to be people at every point in here. So, thank you very much to everyone for sending in your opinions. As always, I took all the scores that we got sent to us. On average, the listeners gave this a 5.7 out of 10, which kind of speaks to the fact that there's just people all over the place, that it's kind of middle of the road. So, with that being said, Jeff, that just leaves me and you. I will let you go first. What are you going to score Freddy vs. Jason out of 10?
Keeping in mind that this is Freddy Part 8 and Jason Part 11, and Jason X, Jason Goes to Space, already happened. Both being a bit of a cash grab and a celebration of both franchises that has Robert Englund and a lot of blood and a lot of silly, wacky, memorable moments and a damn good score from the same composer as Bride of Chucky. Yes, I am biased. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. No, it's not the best Freddy movie, but it delivers exactly what's on the tin. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to talk about, and it's fun to rewatch. It was great in a packed theater, and that was the way it was designed to be seen, and that's the most successful way to see it. So, like, it really could have been better in a lot of ways, and it wouldn't have taken a lot of work or attention to make that happen. And the CG is a little, and then you've also got some of those really unfortunate 2003 moments.
Yeah.
and that drags it down, you know. But it's just a little bit better than 5, you know.
Yeah.
6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. For me, when I sort of think about this film, and you know, we've talked through them. There's tons of flaws with this film. You know, you sit there and you can go through this film and toothpick it from start to finish. There's so many flaws from the script, from some of the acting choices, from some of the casting choices, to some of the CGI, to just some of the storytelling. Like there's so much with this film that you can sit and nitpick. But like we kind of said, if you fix some of those things, I don't think you necessarily get a better film, and I think you actually might get a slightly less enjoyable film. This film is not good, but I can't help but love it for its flaws. I love it for its flaws, and what's good about this film is the flaws. Like the flaws are what's good about this as well. But like what's good about this film is good as well. You know, we get like this really sort of batshit metal sort of fucking fight scene between the two at the end, and you know, we get some really sort of fun imaginative kills, and there are funny moments in it, and you know, there are it has everything I think you want from a versus movie of this kind. You know, I don't want my Freddy versus Jason movie to be this sort of super meta, you know, A24 style horror movie. Like that's just not gonna work. You know, could you imagine that? Like, I want it to be, you know, this fucking cheesy homage, this 2003 homage to what 80s horror really was all about. And you know, like 80s horror was, you know, blood, tits, and kills. Like that was it. That was what 80s horror was all about, and you get it all in abundance here. Like I like, yeah, like for me, because it's so heavy on the flaws, and it's so divisive. I'm gonna go slap band in the middle. I'm gonna give it a 5, and I think that's being fair. Having said that, just to remind everyone, Candy and Nico will give their scores for it at some point, so I will update the leaderboard with their scores, but this is just based on what we've just all talked about just now. So our scores and the critic scores that I've announced means that Freddy vs. Jason has an average score of 5 out of 10, so it's slap bang in the middle. It is in 90th place, however, of our now 107 movies that we've covered on the show. So it's right down there at the bottom. It's right down low on the list. It's not going to get much higher than that, I don't think.
Can you see who it's surrounded by?
Yeah. So a couple just above it, you've got, so the 3 films that are above it, you've got Silent Hill from 2006, which was a very poorly received movie. Willy's Wonderland is also just above it, which is way lower down on the list than I think that deserves to be. And then, funnily enough, Scary Movie is directly above it, which shares an actor from this film, and I cannot remember his actor's name off the top of my head, but the guy who plays the police officer in Freddy vs. Jason, also in Scary Movie, so he has 2 movies lower down. And then if you go just below it, you've got Cockneys vs. Zombies just below it, Hubie Halloween, and Resident Evil. That's the 3 movies below it, so it's in some interesting company.
I was just gonna say, interesting company.
That's like a movie. That's a movie marathon. That's an interesting one. If that's your movie marathon on like a Sunday afternoon, I might send you to get some psychiatric help.
Yeah, I'm gonna hide all the sharp objects and prescription medications in your house.
Yeah.
Just until further notice.
But yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I could probably put Candy's score in now, and I think it'll probably be the first 0 that's ever been given out on the show. I cannot see her giving any sort of score for this. However, I've not actually really talked to Nico that much about it. I feel like this is definitely the kind of movie that he's gonna fuck with. So I would imagine he might counteract that a little bit, and I think he might give this a relatively high score.
I don't know if this correlates, but in a similar way that I like this movie quite a bit more than most, than the haters. I feel similarly about Halloween Resurrection.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm exactly.
So many moments in that movie that are like, what? And it's hysterical and awesome. I fucking love when Busta Rhymes like, Michael Myers, is a great white shark in a white mask. It's like, wait, is he rapping? He was giving a news report. Is he rapping? Oh my god, that movie is so fun if you just throw your hands up and let it be.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a lot how I feel about Freddy versus Jason.
For me, it's like these three films, and unfortunately, it's Halloween Resurrection, it's Jason X, and it's Freddy versus Jason. Those are the three films where you can just be like, you know what? Now, if you want to do that as a movie marathon one afternoon, I'm totally down for that. You know, I could totally fuck with that shit. But I totally understand why people would love that. Anyways, thank you very, very much to everyone for giving us your opinions. We really, really appreciate it. And that's it. That's going to do it for the show this week. Jeff, thank you very, very much, as always, for agreeing to come back on the show. It was really great to have you back on the show. We've had a really great discussion. Apologies for keeping you maybe a bit longer than I initially intended, but thank you very, very much for coming back on the show. Do you want to remind everyone about Movies for Dayz and where you can be found?
Oh, sure thing. And think nothing of it. This was such a great time. I always love talking to you, so thanks for having me. And anybody who wants to hear more of my damn voice can check me out at Movies Dayz. Movies is spelled with a Z. That's on Twitter. Or if you want to see me bouncing around on the Slasher app, it's at Movies 4Dayz. Dayz is still spelled with a Z, but stick a number 4 right in the middle. I am your weekly deep dive into any movie from any decade with anybody's guess as to how we picked that fucking movie that week. So check out Movies 4Dayz, proud member of the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com, your non-pretentious, easy access movie chat podcast. I never get tired of saying that. Just like I never get tired of listening to Pod of the Damned.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me again, dude. I had such a great time talking to you.
No, thank you very, very much. And as I said to you earlier, thank you very much for sort of stepping in and helping us out last minute, because we were caught a little short. So thank you very, very much as well for making sure that we've been able to get a show released this week. So thank you very, very much. If you would like to support this podcast across our platforms, we're on Twitter at Damned Podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, Pod of the Damned. You can email us, podofthedamned@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. You can also get us on TikTok. We do kind of release some TikToks there every once in a while. We try to be a little quirky and a little fun, and you know, well, I think we are. Everyone else probably doesn't think so. But if you want to go watch me attempt to be fun on TikTok, then we're also on there at Pod of the Damned as well. So please go check us out. Next week on the show, or our next episode topic on the show, is another fun one, and we're going to be talking about Frankenhooker. Which I'm very excited to talk about. Love that movie. that's a movie and a half. But yeah, so that's what's coming up next on the show. So stick around for that. We also have the next episode in our next topic for our top 5 mini series that we've been doing as well has been set. So our next top 5 movie will be on foreign language horror movies, so non-English speaking horror films, which should be a really interesting chat as well. So we're really looking forward to that. And then we'll also finally get our Maxine episode released, because by that time I will definitely have been able to go and see it. I've had to put it off for a few weeks, but we will get that Maxine chat out there soon. And then by that time, there's going to be so much coming out in horror. Like this is a really big sort of 3-4 months about to approach for horror. There's so much coming out in the rest of 2024, from Terrifier 3 to Beetlejuice 2 to Alien Romulus to Nosferatu to everything else, and everything else that's in between. That's just, you know, some of the sort of big hitters that are still to come out this year, but there's an absolute ton of really, really great horror films that are coming out this year that I'm really excited for. So very, very much looking forward to that.
Now this is only a minor spoiler. You understand, in Maxine, Jenna Ortega is not in the movie.
Oh, what?
I just want you to know that ahead of time, Ian. I don't want you to just come into this thing with hate in your heart.
It's fine.
Because Jenna Ortega's not there.
It's fine. I'll get my fill in Beetlejuice 2. It's okay. You know, she's in like 17 other horror projects this year. So
17 other non-horror projects as well.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
But fuck me, Blue. What was it I was gonna say about? I've got so much horror I need to catch up on.
Yeah.
Before I can even get into all the horror that's coming. So no, it's a great time to be a horror fan.
Absolutely. But on that note, once again, thank you very much, Newman, for joining me. Thank you to all of our listeners and for downloading and listening to this episode. We really appreciate each and every single one of you. And until next week on the Pod of the Damned, just remember, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.